The cage and the cry for help. The sound of cold metallic chains echoed through the dark room. A young alien girl, her skin pale and bruised, sat huddled in the corner of a small iron cage. Her hands were bound by thick, rusty shackles, and her ankles were shackled to the floor. Every time she moved, the chains rattled, reminding her of how trapped she really was. Her body ached, but the pain in her chest was the worst. It wasn't just the physical wounds, though they hurt. No, it was the feeling of being abandoned, of being forgotten. She had no idea how long she had been in this cage. Days, weeks, maybe longer. It didn't matter. Time felt meaningless now. Her once beautiful, shimmering eyes were dull and lifeless as she stared into the emptiness. She couldn't even remember the last time she had seen another living soul. The only sounds she heard were the distant echoes of laughter from her captors who seemed to enjoy her suffering. She had been brought here as a prize, an alien to be caged. Her worth only measured by how long she could survive in such conditions. The air in the cage was stale, making it hard to breathe. Each breath felt like it was pulling the life from her. She had been stripped of everything, her dignity, her hope, and her freedom. She was nothing more than an object to be discarded when she was no longer of use. But she wasn't ready to die, not yet. The thought of dying here, alone, with no one to care, terrified her. What had she done to deserve this? She had been kind, gentle, and caring. She had never hurt anyone. So why had this happened to her? Her mind wandered, drifting between memories of a life before the cage. She remembered laughter, warmth, and a time when she felt loved. But those memories felt like a distant dream, fading away with each passing day. Now all she could feel was the cold metal against her skin and the crushing loneliness in her heart. Her stomach growled, but she didn't have the strength to care anymore. Food had become a distant memory, something she had long since stopped craving. The guards gave her scraps, but she hadn't been able to eat much for days. Food seemed irrelevant in a place like this. Survival itself was what mattered now. Suddenly she heard a noise. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. She tensed, her heart racing. Was it one of the guards coming to check on her, or was it someone else? She strained her ears, trying to listen for any clues. The footsteps were growing louder, but they weren't coming from the usual direction. They were coming closer, faster. Her heart beat harder, faster. Could this be it? Could someone finally be coming to rescue her? As the footsteps neared, her mind raced with 1,000 questions. Should she call out? Should she try to get their attention? Or was it better to stay silent to wait and see who was coming? The sound of the footsteps stopped just outside her cage. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the lock clicked, and the door creaked open. She flinched, instinctively shrinking, back into the shadows. Whoever it was, they were about to see her, weak, dirty, and broken. The human who appeared before her wasn't like the others. He wasn't a guard, nor was he one of the people who had put her here. His face showed no cruelty, no malice. Instead, there was confusion in his eyes, mixed with something else, something she hadn't seen in a long time. Concern. He looked at her, and for a moment, neither of them moved. She couldn't speak, couldn't find the words. But he didn't seem to expect her to. Instead, he knelt down in front of the cage, his gaze softening as he studied her. "What are you doing here?" she wanted to ask, but her voice was nothing more than a whisper lost in the silence. He seemed to notice her discomfort. Slowly, he reached out and touched the cold metal bars of the cage, as if trying to understand her pain. His fingers brushed lightly against the chains, and she shivered even though the air was warm. I didn't know you were here," he said, his voice soft but filled with guilt. "I didn't know you were suffering." The alien girl didn't know what to make of his words. Was he really sincere? Or was he just another cruel person playing with her emotions before leaving her to die? But something in his eyes made her think he was different. He wasn't like the others. Maybe, just maybe, he could be the one to help her escape. As the human stood up and began to walk toward the door, she took a deep breath, a small glimmer of hope stirring inside her. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt something other than fear. Could this human be her savior? Or was it too late for her? The sound of the human's footsteps faded as he walked away, leaving the girl alone in her cage once again. But this time something was different. For the first time she felt like there was a chance that someone might hear her cries and set her free. The human's dilemma. The silence of the dark, cold room felt suffocating, but for the first time in what seemed like forever, the alien girl felt a flicker of hope. She had heard the footsteps. She had seen the human standing before her. He had knelt beside her, his eyes full of something she couldn't quite comprehend. But then he had walked away, leaving her to wonder whether it had all been a dream. She strained her ears, listening for the sound of his retreating footsteps. But there was only silence. Was he leaving? Was he really gone, like everyone else, before him? Her heart sank with the thought, but she refused to let the despair take over. She couldn't afford to give up. Not now. Not when someone had finally shown her the smallest bit of compassion. Her mind was racing. What if he's coming back? She thought, her pulse quickening. What if he actually means to help me? She had to believe that something good could happen. After all this time, after everything she'd been through, maybe there was a chance. Then, she heard it. A soft scraping sound followed by the unmistakable sound of the cage door opening. Her eyes flew open and she sat up straighter, her heart thumping wildly in her chest. She forced herself to hold her breath as she looked toward the door. It wasn't the guards. No, this time it was him. The human had returned. This time his face was serious. His expression had changed from one of confusion to one of determination. He moved quickly, but there was an edge to his movement, like he was afraid someone might stop him. He knelt down in front of her again, closer this time, his eyes locking with hers. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. Why are you here?" The human didn't answer right away. Instead, his gaze shifted to her shackles, the chains that had bound her to the floor for what felt like an eternity. His hands trembled slightly as he reached out, touching the cold metal. He seemed to hesitate, but then, with a deep breath, he grabbed the key from his belt. "I don't know why I'm here," he said, his voice low. "But I know I can't leave you like this." Her heart pounded harder. Could he really help her? Could this human be different? Or was he just another person who would get close only to leave her disappointed? As the key slid into the lock of the cage, she held her breath. This moment could either be the start of her freedom or the beginning of her worst nightmare. She had trusted before, only to be betrayed. Her guards, her captors, they had promised her the same things, only to break her hopes over and over. But there was something about this human that made her believe, something in his eyes. He wasn't cold or cruel like the others. There was a kindness there, if only she could trust it. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open. The girl winced at the noise, the sharp sound stabbing at her ears. The human didn't move right away. Instead, he looked at her, gauging her reaction as if he wanted to be sure she wasn't afraid of him. "I'm not one of them," he said softly, his words almost a whisper. "I'm not here to hurt you." She looked at him, unsure whether to believe him. He was human after all, and humans had never been kind to her people. But his voice, his eyes, they held something different. Could he truly be trusted? "I don't want to hurt you," the human repeated. "I want to help you, but we have to hurry." The girl didn't know what to say. Words failed her. But her heart told her that this might be the moment. This was the chance she had been waiting for. But would she be strong enough to take it? She slowly stood up, her legs shaking beneath her from exhaustion and weakness. Her body screamed in protest, but she gritted her teeth, refusing to let herself fall. The human watched her carefully, his gaze never leaving her as he reached down to help steady her. But as she took a step forward, a sound stopped them both. The unmistakable click of boots on the cold floor, footsteps growing louder. The girl's breath caught in her throat. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice trembling. The human's eyes widened, and in an instant, he grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the exit. They had no time to lose. He moved fast, guiding her through the dark hallways, his hand firm but gentle on her back. The girl's heart raced. She had no idea where they were going, but she didn't question it. She was being freed. She was finally leaving her cage. But then, the unmistakable sound of voices echoed in the distance. The guards. They had noticed. Something was wrong. "Go!" the human hissed, pushing her forward. "Don't stop!" The girl's legs were shaky, but adrenaline coursed through her body. She forced herself to move faster, her mind only focused on one thing: getting out, getting to safety. But with each step she could hear the guards getting closer. Time was running out. As they reached a narrow corridor, the human stopped. He turned to face her, his eyes full of urgency. "You need to hide," he said quickly, his voice tight, with panic. "I'll distract them. Go now." The girl's breath came in sharp gasps. She didn't want to leave him behind. She couldn't. But the human grabbed her shoulders, pushing her toward the shadowed corner of the hall. "Go," he repeated, his voice strained. "I'll be right behind you." The girl didn't hesitate. She ran, slipping into the shadows, her heart racing. She could hear the human's footsteps behind her, but the sound of approaching guards made her blood run cold. Was this it? Would she ever see him again? As she hid in the dark, she prayed that the human would survive. She had trusted him, and now her fate rested on his shoulders. Would he be able to keep her safe, or had this been another cruel trick? The escape plan. The girl's heart was still racing as she crouched in the shadows, her eyes darting toward the narrow hallway ahead. She could feel the thrum of panic in her chest. But there was something else too. Something stronger. Hope. It flickered inside her like a fragile candle in the dark. She had been given a chance to escape. She had trusted the human, and now it was time for action. The air around her felt thick with tension. The human had told her to hide, but she wasn't sure where he had gone. The sound of the approaching guards grew louder, their voices echoing down the corridor. The girl's pulse quickened. Time was running out. She had to act. She had to trust him, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. She dared a glance back, just in time to see the human round the corner, his eyes wide with fear but determined. He looked at her for a brief moment, long enough to see her nod. She understood. He was going to help her no matter the cost. "Stay quiet," he whispered, his voice urgent. "We're almost there." Her eyes widened as he motioned for her to follow. She couldn't hesitate, not now. She took a deep breath, feeling her feet moving before her mind even had a chance to catch up. The human was leading her through the maze of hallways, his figure barely visible in the darkness, but his presence was a beacon she could follow. Every step felt like a heartbeat, her body aching with exhaustion, but she didn't dare slow down. They reached a door at the end of the hall, and the human paused, his hand hovering over the doorknob. He glanced at her, eyes filled with intensity. "This is it," he said. "Once we go through here, there's no turning back. They'll be looking for us, and we won't have much time." The girl nodded, her throat tight. "I understand. But we have to do this." The human pushed the door open, and they slipped into a dimly lit room. The air was different here, less cold, less oppressive, but it didn't bring her peace. It only deepened the sense of urgency. They were still inside the compound, and the guards were still out there, hunting them. The human turned to face her. "We need to move quickly. I have a plan, but we have to trust each other." "Trust," she repeated softly, the word foreign to her. She had been betrayed so many times. How could she trust anyone now? But the human had shown her nothing but kindness, and for the first time in a long while she was willing to take the risk. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The human reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, worn map. He spread it out on the table, his fingers tracing the lines with precision. "There's a tunnel system underneath this place. I know where it is, but we'll have to get past the guards to reach it. The girl's heart pounded as she leaned over the map. The guards, she said, glancing back toward the door. What if they catch us? We'll have to be quick, the human replied, his voice low but firm. We can't afford to make any noise. Once we're in the tunnel, we'll be safe. But we need to get there without them seeing us. The girl's mind raced as she studied the map. She wasn't sure what was more frightening, the guards or the unknown darkness of the tunnel. Either way, the human was right. There was no turning back. She had already come this far. How do we get past them? She asked, her voice trembling. The human paused, his gaze flickering toward the door. We'll have to be careful. There's a guard posted at the tunnel entrance, but I can distract him. I'll need you to move when I give you the signal. Do you understand? The girl nodded, though fear gripped her heart. She had never been in a situation like this. She had never had to run, to fight, to trust someone else with her life. But now she didn't have a choice. They took one last look at the map, memorizing the route. The human checked his pocket watch. We don't have much time. If we're caught, we won't survive. She nodded again, her hands trembling as she wiped the sweat from her forehead. She didn't want to die here. Not like this. The human turned toward the door, his hand hovering over the handle. Get ready, he whispered. When I make the noise, you run. Don't stop. Don't look back. Her breath caught in her throat. What noise? The human's lips curled into a wry smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. A distraction. Without warning, he threw the door open and dashed into the hallway. The girl's heart leaped into her throat as the sound of his footsteps echoed, growing fainter as he sprinted down the hall. She could hear the guards' voices now, growing louder as they turned the corner. The girl's body surged with adrenaline. She didn't know how long she had, but she knew it wasn't much. She waited, her hands clenched into fists, her eyes fixed on the shadowy doorway. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the hallway, the sound of metal striking the floor, followed by a loud shout. Now! Without a second thought, the girl dashed from her hiding place, her feet pounding against the floor as she ran toward the tunnel entrance. Her breath came in short, frantic bursts as she ran for her life. The sound of footsteps behind her made her blood run cold, but she kept going, forcing herself to move faster, to get farther. She reached the tunnel entrance, but there was no sign of the human. Her chest tightened in panic, but then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw him, standing at the entrance, motioning for her to hurry. Come on, he shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. Without hesitation, she sprinted toward him. The door to the tunnel slammed shut behind them, leaving the guards searching, unaware of where they had gone. The human grabbed her arm, pulling her into the darkness of the tunnel, and they disappeared into the shadows, the sounds of the compound's chaos echoing above them. The girl's heart pounded in her chest, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to breathe. She was free, but the path ahead was still uncertain. The tunnel stretched out before them, dark and endless, and she had no idea where it would lead. But she was alive, and that was all that mattered. The betrayal, the cold, damp air of the tunnel wrapped around the girl like a suffocating shroud. The only sounds were their hurried footsteps echoing off the stone walls, the only light coming from the faint glow of the human's small flashlight. She followed close behind him, the distant sounds of the compound slowly fading as they descended deeper into the labyrinth below. Her heart was still racing, the adrenaline from their escape still fresh in her veins. For the first time since her captivity began, she felt the weight of the chains that had bound her release, almost lighter now. But as they moved further into the tunnel, a sense of unease crept back into her chest. There was something wrong. Something she couldn't quite place. The human led the way, his flashlight flickering in the darkness, casting long shadows across the walls. His face was tense, every movement careful, calculated. It wasn't just fear she saw in his eyes, it was something else. Determination, but also something darker, a feeling she couldn't quite shake. They had been running for what felt like hours, the tunnel twisting and turning with no end in sight. She began to question if they were even heading in the right direction. The girl had never been to these parts of the compound. The human had promised her an escape, but as they moved deeper into the underbelly of the compound, the uncertainty began to weigh heavier on her. "I thought you said we were close," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. The human's pace didn't slow. He didn't look back at her immediately. When he did, the flicker of the flashlight revealed the strain in his face. "We are," he replied, his voice tight. "We're almost there." But the girl noticed something that chilled her. His eyes darted quickly as though he was scanning the shadows behind them. Something wasn't right. A creeping feeling slithered down her spine, her instincts screaming at her to be cautious. She had seen that look before, the look of someone who was pretending to be confident but wasn't. It was a lie, and she could feel it in her bones. Suddenly, the faint sound of footsteps echoed behind them. The girl froze, her heart lurching into her throat. She barely had time to process it before the human spun around, his hand shooting out to stop her. "Stay quiet," he hissed. The girl nodded, her body instinctively pressing against the wall of the tunnel, heart hammering in her chest. The footsteps grew closer. She held her breath, trying to keep as still as possible. The human, standing in front of her, didn't move. His hand was still gripping the flashlight, but his knuckles were white from the strain. He listened intently, his gaze shifting through the tunnel, as if trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. The footsteps stopped just ahead. A shadow flickered in the dim light, casting a tall, dark figure across the tunnel. It wasn't one of the guards. They moved too quietly. No, this was someone else, someone who knew they were there. A voice, low and hushed, echoed through the tunnel. "I know you're here, both of you. There's no point in running." The girl's blood ran cold. The human's expression turned from focused to something else entirely, something she couldn't understand. The voice continued, chilling in its calmness. "You really thought you could escape? You're in more danger now than you were before." The human's face shifted, a look of recognition crossing his features. It was only for a moment, but the girl saw it clearly. He knew this voice. He knew who it was. "I did what I had to do," the human said quietly, his voice suddenly sharp. The girl didn't understand. What was happening? Why did the human seem so defeated? This wasn't the same man who had helped her escape. This was someone else. Someone who had been hiding something. From the shadows emerged a figure, a tall man, his uniform dark and imposing. He was no stranger to the human, but he was a stranger to the girl. The man's eyes gleamed in the dim light and he stepped closer, his hands raised in mock surrender. "Did you really think I wouldn't find you?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain. The human didn't speak. His body was tense, like a coiled spring, but he didn't make a move. "Don't do this," the girl whispered, her voice shaking. She took a small step forward, desperate to break the tension in the air. "Please help us." The man smiled coldly. "Help you?" He turned to the human. "You had a chance. You made your choice." A sickening realization slowly dawned on the girl. This wasn't a guard. This was someone else, someone the human had known, someone who had betrayed them. "You're the one who let me down, aren't you?" she said, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "You're the reason I'm here. You helped them keep me locked up." The human's face flickered with pain, but he didn't speak. The man, still standing with a smug look on his face, laughed. "Oh, she's right, you know. He was supposed to be your savior." He turned back to the human. "But I knew you'd be weak. I knew you'd fail her." The girl looked between them, her mind reeling with disbelief. This was all a game to them, wasn't it? She had never been anything more than a pawn in someone else's twisted plan. "You're going to leave us here to die," she said, her voice breaking. The human's jaw clenched. "I never wanted this." The man raised an eyebrow. "But you did it. You turned on your own kind for a prisoner, a worthless alien." Tears burned the girl's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I'm not worthless. The human's eyes softened, but he was already shaking his head. There was nothing he could do. Not anymore. The man smiled as he stepped forward, his hand reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small device and pressed a button. Instantly, a series of clicks and locks sounded, and the girl realized too late that they were no longer alone. More men stepped out of the shadows, their faces unreadable, their weapons drawn. The human had betrayed her. He had been part of their trap all along. In the dim glow of the tunnel, the girl's world shattered. She had trusted him. She had trusted the one person who had promised to save her, and now she was more trapped than ever. As the men closed in, the human turned his back, walking away without another word. The girl stood frozen, feeling every shred of hope vanish in the darkness. The betrayal stung deeper than the chains ever could. The alien's secret. The girl stood motionless, her mind struggling to make sense of what had just happened. The human, the one person she had trusted above all others, had betrayed her. The bitter sting of that betrayal cut deeper than the chains ever could. Her heart pounded in her chest, and the dark shadows of the tunnel seemed to grow longer, more oppressive, as if the walls themselves were closing in around her. The sound of footsteps approaching from behind broke her from her thoughts. She spun around, her breath catching in her throat, but it wasn't the human. It was the man who had revealed the truth, the one who had set all of this in motion. His cold smile sent chills down her spine as he stepped closer, his boots clicking softly on the stone floor. You didn't really think he was going to help, Hugh, did you? His voice was filled with mocking amusement, and his eyes gleamed with something darker. Satisfaction. She couldn't speak. The betrayal was too fresh, too painful. She wanted to scream at him, to lash out, but her body felt numb, as though the weight of everything that had happened was too much for her to carry. You've been playing right into my hands all along, the man continued, his grin widening. You were never meant to be freed. You were never meant to survive. He stepped even closer, his face now inches from hers. And you're just another tool, a pawn, in a game you'll never understand. Her anger flared, but it was quickly replaced by confusion. What do you want from me? She managed to choke out, her voice barely above a whisper. The man's laughter was low, cruel. You're too late to understand. This isn't about you. This isn't about the human either. He took a step back, spreading his arms as if reveling in the moment. It's about what you can do for me. She stared at him, trying to piece it together, but the words didn't make sense. What? What do you mean? Her voice faltered. That's right, he said, his voice laced with venom. You don't know, do you? How could you? You're just a prisoner, an alien. You have no idea what's inside you. The girl's heart stopped for a moment. She took a step back. What are you talking about? The man's gaze darkened. You were brought here for a reason. You're not just any alien. You were captured because of something in your blood, something you don't even know you have. His smile became sinister. You're special. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the words. Special? How could she be special? She was nothing but a prisoner, nothing but a forgotten tool for their amusement. But the man wasn't finished. He stepped forward again, his voice lowering, now filled with dark anticipation. You see, you carry something inside you, a power that could change the galaxy. Your blood, your DNA. It's been altered, engineered for something bigger than anyone ever imagined. Her breath caught in her throat as the weight of his words settled in. Power. Altered? She shook her head, trying to make sense of it all. I don't understand. What are you talking about? What's inside me? The man's eyes glinted with triumph. The ability to heal, faster than any known species. The power to manipulate energy, to influence things around you. He leaned in closer, his voice lowering. And most importantly, the key to unlocking the most coveted technology the universe has ever seen. She stepped back, her hands trembling. That's not possible. I'm just an alien. I don't have any of that." "That's where you're wrong," the man sneered. "You've always had it. You've just never known how to use it." He straightened, letting out a long breath as if he had been waiting for this moment. "And now, thanks to your little escape, we've finally unlocked the secret. You are the key. You are the weapon." Her mind reeled with the impossible truth. She didn't know how to respond, how to react to the shocking revelation. She had never felt powerful. She had only known weakness, fear, and pain. But this man's words, they filled her with a sickening dread. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What do you plan to do with me?" The man's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "I plan to use you, of course. You'll do what I tell you, when I tell you. You'll give me everything I need. And when you've outlived your usefulness, then I'll let you die." He paused, his smile widening. "But first I need to make sure you understand. I need to make sure you know what's at stake." He turned and motioned to the guards who had been standing at the entrance of the tunnel. They stepped forward, their faces cold, emotionless. The man gestured to the girl. "Take her," he commanded. One of the guards stepped forward, his hand reaching for her. The girl instinctively recoiled, but there was no escape now. They had her, and with the knowledge of what she carried inside her, they were never going to let her go. But just as the guard's hand brushed against her arm, the girl felt something strange. A surge of energy pulsed through her body. For a brief moment, she felt an overwhelming warmth, a force rising up from deep within her, responding to the man's words. She gasped, startled by the intensity of the sensation. The man's eyes narrowed and his grin deepened. "Ah, there it is," he said softly. "It's in you. I can feel it. You're awakening, and you'll never be the same again." The girl's head spun, her body trembling as the energy inside her grew stronger, pulsing with a force she didn't understand. Panic flooded her veins, but it was more than panic. There was power, a strange, foreign power awakening inside her. "No," she whispered, shaking her head, "I don't want this." But the man was already moving too far ahead of her, already thinking of his next move. "You don't have a choice. You never did." Suddenly, the girl's body seemed to act on its own, her hands trembling as the energy inside her surged, once again. She felt the guard's grip on her weaken, their touch becoming less solid, as though they were being pushed back by an invisible force. The girl's heart skipped a beat. Could she really do this? Was she really capable of this power? The guards stumbled backward, their faces filled with confusion, but the girl's gaze locked onto the man, the one who had betrayed her, the one who had played her for a fool. His eyes widened as he realized what was happening. "No," he whispered, his voice trembling with disbelief. You're too powerful." The girl took a step forward, her hands trembling with a strange new energy. "I'm not your weapon," she said, her voice stronger now, laced with a confidence she didn't know she had. "You can't control me anymore." The power inside her surged again, and with it came a new sense of clarity. She was no longer just a prisoner. She was something far greater. And she was about to take control of her own destiny, the final showdown. The tunnel was silent for a moment, the air thick with tension. The girl stood there, her body still trembling, the surge of energy she had just felt coursing through her like a storm. The guards, who had once seemed like an impenetrable force, now stood in disbelief, their hands hovering at their sides, unsure of what to do next. But they didn't move toward her. Instead, they glanced at each other, their faces full of confusion and fear. The man who had betrayed her, the one who had orchestrated everything, stood in the center of the room, his expression twisted with shock. His hand was raised as though ready to give another command, but for the first time since she had met him, there was doubt in his eyes. And that doubt fueled the girl's resolve. She had been nothing but a pawn in his game. But now, she was more than that. She was power. She was freedom. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but her mind was sharp, focused. The energy that had awakened inside her, the power she hadn't known she had, thrummed beneath her skin, making her feel alive, in a way she never had before. It wasn't just a physical sensation, it was a mental clarity that filled every part of her. She could feel the air, feel the pressure building around her as though the world itself was waiting for her to make the next move. The girl stepped forward, her feet moving with a sense of purpose. The guards hesitated, looking at each other, their uncertainty becoming palpable. They didn't know how to handle this new version of her. They had been trained to fight, to control, but they had never been prepared for her to fight back. "Stay back," the man ordered, his voice shaking. His facade of confidence was crumbling, and the girl could see it. He was losing control, and he knew it, but she wasn't interested in his commands anymore. She was done being told what to do, done being treated like a tool. "Why?" she asked, her voice steady, her eyes narrowing. "Why did you do this to me?" The man's lips curled into a sneer. "You were never meant to be saved. You were always just a means to an end." He stepped closer, his voice rising. "I had plans for you, plans that would have changed everything. But now—" He paused, his gaze flickering to the guards. "Now you've ruined it." The girl felt the anger bubbling up inside her, the power inside her body responding to the surge of emotion. The walls of the tunnel seemed to close in, and the very air felt charged with her fury. "No," she said, her voice low, but full of certainty. "You ruined it. You destroyed everything I was. But now I'm going to take control." The power that had been simmering inside her erupted. It was as if the very energy of the universe itself had been harnessed within her, her body, vibrating with the force of it. She extended her hands, and without thinking, the energy shot out from her fingertips, hitting the guards with a force so powerful it sent them crashing against the walls. They staggered, disoriented, unable to understand what had just happened. But the girl didn't wait for them to recover. The power inside her was a floodgate now, rushing through her, guiding her actions. The man's eyes widened in disbelief. "No, this isn't possible." "I'm not your weapon," she said, her voice steady, her control over the energy growing with every passing second. "I'm not anyone's weapon, and I'm not going to let you use me anymore." She could feel the man's anger, the fury in his eyes, but it didn't matter anymore. His betrayal had only fueled her strength. The guards were still on the ground, groaning, trying to gather themselves, but they weren't her focus. She had one goal now: to take control of her own fate. With a swift movement, she pointed toward the man who had betrayed her. The energy around her intensified, and she felt the ground tremble beneath her. The walls seemed to shake as if the very tunnel was reacting to the power she had just unlocked. "No," he shouted, his hands raised in a futile attempt to stop her. "You don't know what you're doing. You'll destroy everything." "I already have," she replied, her voice cold and calm as the energy surged around her. She had the power now. She had the strength to rewrite her story, to take back the life that had been stolen from her. The man took a step back, fear creeping into his expression. "You can't control it," he said, his voice trembling. "You're not ready. You don't understand the power you possess. It will consume you." She stepped forward, the power around her pulsing with intensity. "You're wrong," she said, her voice full of authority. "This power is me. I've never been more in control than I am right now." She extended her hand toward him, and the energy shot forward, wrapping around him like an invisible chain. His body jerked, his eyes wide with fear as he tried to break free. But the energy held him in place, the power too strong for him to escape. He struggled, his face contorting in desperation. "You can't do this. You don't know the consequences. You'll destroy everything you've ever known. But she wasn't listening. She didn't need to hear his words anymore. They were just lies, just attempts to keep her bound in chains. She had already broken free, and there was no turning back. The guards, still on the ground, tried to get to their feet, but they were too slow. The girl's energy surged once again, this time reaching out to them, sending them tumbling back into the walls with a force that knocked the breath from their lungs. Leave them, the man pleaded, his voice hoarse. You'll never be able to stop it, it will consume you too. But the girl just shook her head. I'm already free. With one final surge of energy, she flung the man away from her. He slammed into the far wall with a deafening crash, crumpling to the ground, unconscious. The guards were no better off, their bodies scattered across the tunnel floor, their movements slow and weak. The girl stood tall, her breath coming in sharp bursts, her hands still crackling with power. The tunnel was silent once more. The man who had betrayed her, the one who had tried to control her, lay motionless. The guards were no longer a threat. For the first time in her life, she was free, and she was no longer afraid. She walked toward the exit, her steps steady and purposeful. The power within her was still there, waiting, but she had learned how to control it. She was no longer just a victim of fate. She was the one who controlled her future. As she stepped into the open air, the girl felt the weight of her journey. Behind her, the tunnel, the betrayal, the pain. It was all in the past now. She had taken control, and the world ahead of her was wide open. A new beginning. The girl stood at the edge of the compound, her body still buzzing with the energy that had surged through her just moments before. The air around her felt charged, as though the very atmosphere was reacting to the transformation she had just undergone. The tunnel that had led her out of captivity was now far behind her, but the echoes of everything she had endured still clung to her, deep inside. She had been a prisoner, a victim, but not anymore. The power that had awakened inside her was now an undeniable part of who she was. It was more than just raw energy. It was control, freedom, a force that gave her the strength to face whatever lay ahead. And yet, as she looked out at the vast open world in front of her, a strange feeling lingered within her, a nagging uncertainty. It wasn't fear exactly, but it was the weight of knowing that her life would never be the same. The world she was about to enter wasn't the same one she had known. It wasn't even the same world she had imagined in her wildest dreams. Everything had changed, and with that change came the realization that the path forward was unknown. She wasn't sure where to go or what to do. All she knew was that for the first time, she wasn't running from something. She was walking toward a something, toward her future. But before she could take another step, a voice broke through the silence. Wait. The girl froze. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. It was the human, the one who had betrayed her, the one who had once promised her freedom only to turn on her when it suited him. The girl's heart beat a little faster, but not out of fear. This time, it was something else, something hard and cold. She wasn't the same person who had blindly trusted him. She was stronger now. She was free. Turning slowly, she faced him. He stood a few feet away, his eyes still filled with a mixture of regret and confusion, but there was something else there too. Desperation. He was reaching out, his voice strained, as though he was trying to bridge a gap between them that had already been broken. You don't have to do this, he said, his voice low, pleading. You don't have to be alone. The girl felt a rush of memories, of their shared moments, of the pain he had caused her, of the times when she had hoped, despite everything, that he would be the one to save her. But now she realized how wrong she had been to think he could be anything more than a reflection of the world she had been trapped in, a world of manipulation and lies. Why? She asked quietly, her voice steady but cutting. Why did you do it? Why betray me? The human flinched as if her words had physically struck him. He took a step toward her, his eyes never leaving hers. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought if I played my part, I could end this. I thought I could protect you. But I see now that I only helped put you in danger. She held up a hand, silencing him. Don't make excuses. He stopped, the words dying on his lips, and for a long moment there was nothing but the sound of the wind around them. The girl stood tall, feeling the weight of the world shifting beneath her. But she was no longer afraid. You've already done enough, she said, her voice calm but unwavering. You've given me the power to move forward, but I'm done with you. I'm done with all of it. The human's face fell, the weight of his regret visible in his eyes. He looked like he wanted to say something, anything that might change her mind, but he didn't know what to say. She had already made her choice. For a moment he stood there, lost in the realization of his own failure. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. I'm sorry. The girl didn't respond. Instead, she turned her back to him, stepping forward into the unknown. Every step felt like it was carrying her further away from her past, from the person she had been, the girl who had been lost, who had been broken. She wasn't that person anymore, but just as she took another step, she heard the soft sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to look over her shoulder, her gaze narrowing. The human was still there, watching her, his eyes filled with something she couldn't place. You're not going to stop me, she said firmly. I've already made my choice. I'm done being a prisoner, done being someone's tool. I know, he said softly. But you don't have to do it alone. There's a whole world out there, people who need someone like you. The girl paused. For a fleeting moment, she almost felt the old flicker of hope. The idea that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to find redemption for him. But the truth was, she didn't need to save him. She needed to save herself. Thank you for showing me the way, she said, her voice steady. But I'm going to walk my own path now. With that, she turned back toward the open world before her, walking into the horizon. Her future was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, that uncertainty wasn't terrifying. It was liberating. As the girl walked farther away, the human stood there watching her, but there was no regret in his eyes now. Only the understanding that she had found something he could never give her. Freedom, control, and the courage to face whatever came next. The girl moved faster now, her pace quickening as she felt the air around her change. She could feel the power inside her, the energy that had awakened within her earlier, still alive and pulsing. She was ready. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she didn't need to know. The road ahead was hers to create. And as she walked, the weight of the past, of everything that had tried to hold her back, seemed to lift, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose. The future was wide open, full of possibility. It was hers to shape. The girl was no longer a prisoner. She was no longer anyone's tool. She was free, and nothing would stand in her way.